Hello and welcome back to the studio. Today we are going to be painting pine trees. I'm going to share a couple different techniques with you using a round brush and a flat brush. If you're at all familiar with my watercolors or artwork in general, you will know that I love my trees. They're so easy, whether you want maybe a close-up tree, a standalone, a distant shoreline, something that's moody, layered, has a lot of contrast, or is maybe just a faint little accent in the distance. Whatever it is, we are going to learn how to incorporate some different techniques that are easy, fun, and require next to no work. So the first technique we're going to use is called the dancing technique. With a regular round brush, go ahead and dip it in your paint and just run it lightly down the paper, making that tree trunk. And then you're just going to take the very tip of your brush and dance it along down that line, going from left to right, putting some pressure so that you have those thicker strokes balanced with the lighter tips, and it just lets the tree look very organic and natural and drapey. A great one to put in the background of a painting. The next technique is going to be a little bit more suited for a spruce tree. Once again, we will start with that straight line down, and then instead of dancing back and forth so quickly, I need to take a little bit of the water off the brush. I always use too much water. I don't know what's wrong with me. But we're going to be a little bit more conscientious about the direction of our downward strokes, making sure that they're a little bit more even, that the tree is growing in diameter from the top, where it's really little more than a triangle, to now these downward or the bottom branches where it's branching out a bit. It's that classic Christmas tree look. I've just got so much water on my brush. This is ridiculous. But what I just want to make sure I'm doing with this tree is making it look organic and natural. So as you get that initial shape down, go ahead and run through that tree again with some extra water. Maybe change the angle of your strokes so that it looks a little bit more full. It's a little more wild, branchy, if you will. And now I'm just adding a little bit of black, and this is a good way to add some depth. As long as the paint is still wet, you can use that wet on wet technique. Go ahead and drop in a different color so that you get the shadows that you're looking for. The next tree is going to be somewhat similar, a balsam or spruce. And here I'm taking my absolutely massive flat brush. It is the only one I could find. So it's a bit big for this particular size painting. But we are artists. We make anything work, and it is fun. And as you can see, all I need to do with this one is I'm really letting the brush do all the work for me. I've used up my indigo paint at this point, but I am just dancing it back and forth in a horizontal way. Once again, we want to keep that tree trunk as our anchor to keep the pine look. And then I'm just playing around with some zigzaggy lines, keeping them very crisp, very clear, helping to really get the outline that I want in the tree. The danger of using, or the temptation maybe of using, a flat brush is to overwork the painting. So as you go back and forth and fill in the branches, maybe I want this to be a little bit thicker. I want to make sure that I'm not going over those initial strokes too much. I want to make sure that however this looks at the end, I can still get the effect of some of those bristles and how they appear on the page. And once again, adding in a little bit of the black. If you find that your trees are looking flat, it might be worth adding another color, whether that is a black, a brown. Maybe you're going for a colorful palette and you're doing pinks and blues and purples. Adding just a bit of of color dimension can be a great way to add an element of realism and visual interest to your pine trees. And here I'm just adding a little bit more water, making it less line heavy and adding a little bit of flow from top to bottom. All right, so now we're going to move into what do trees look like? How do we paint a forest of trees? Very rarely will we have these standalone trees. What I like to do, and if you've seen my Misty Forest video, you might be familiar with this technique, but I'm just going to create an outline, sort of a dotted line, but it's not dotted because it's up and down strokes. Anyway, those are the tips of the trees, and it allows me to outline the shape of how do I want the slope of the forest to look. From there, I'm just adding in some scribbles, blocking out the trees. It's my version of a sketch, making sure that I have them evenly spaced. We have those areas of contrast, of shadows that are blocked in for when we do add some, begin to merge it together into something that looks a little bit more organic. With that initial outline in, you can then play around with dropping in some clean water in between the trees to blend and merge the outlines a little bit so they're less blocky, adding a little bit more of the black to add some tree tips behind the ones that we've already created, make the forest look a little bit thicker, clean up the bottom area, and really use my brush to play around with how is the mist moving in the forest, how many of the lines do we want to merge and make more organic. So depending on how wet your paper is, you can drop in some extra paint pigment to create those shadows. You can, if here's a drier area, I can add in a more defined tree, which I also like to do to create that bit of dimension. The next forest that we're going to do is pretty similar, where we're taking our square brush, in this case, a flat brush, and I am using that same technique that we did on that standalone tree, but using it in a forest that's a little bit tighter together. Not worried about the lines running into each other. I'm glad if they do. I'm going to run over it a couple different times to get a little bit more definition. But as you can see, there's a very natural sort of depth that comes with using this technique in a forest setting, and it's so easy. It's like embarrassingly easy and embarrassingly fun. I'm going to switch to a smaller square brush at this point to show just a final technique where you really, it's a distant shoreline. All you do is you run your brush along a flat line, add a little bit of height difference to the trees, maybe run over it a couple times, and you can add a reflection in the water. But that same technique, just water down your pigment a little bit, and I'm going to run my round brush along it, create some dimension, waves, etc. And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this set of watercolor painting techniques for your pine trees. Have fun using them. As usual, if you're not subscribed yet, definitely hit subscribe so you'll get noticed next time we pop into the studio to do some painting together. Head over to my website where we've got some freebies. I'm sharing my list of watercolor supplies and materials that I like to use, which is always fun to see. But yeah, otherwise have a great day, and I will see you again next time.